Hello, how are you today? And are you ready to hear mysteries? If you're ready, I'll tell you.
Shadows in the northern forest. The dense forests of the Pacific Northwest were known for their impenetrable foliage and haunting silence. Sergeant Tom Reynolds and his squad were on a routine training mission, navigating through the rugged terrain. The mission was to test their endurance and survival skills, but what they encountered was something beyond their training. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the trees, the squad set up a temporary camp. The fire crackled, its light flickering on the faces of the soldiers. Conversations were kept to a minimum, each man lost in his thoughts. Private Eric Hansen, a young soldier with a keen eye, was on the first watch. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustling of leaves. Hours passed uneventfully until a faint, rhythmic thudding caught his attention. It was distant but distinct, unlike any animal sound he had ever heard. Sergeant Reynolds Hansen called softly, not wanting to alarm the others. Reynolds approached, his face etched with concern. "What is it, Hansen?" "Listen," Hansen whispered, pointing into the darkness. Reynolds strained his ears, the sound growing louder, coming closer. It was as if something massive was moving through the forest, each step reverberating through the ground. "Wake the others," Reynolds ordered, his voice tense. The soldiers were roused quickly, their senses on high alert. They formed a defensive perimeter, rifles ready. The thudding grew louder, accompanied by a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down their spines. Suddenly, a massive figure emerged from the shadows. Standing at least 8 feet tall, it was covered in dark, matted fur. Its eyes glowed with an eerie, reddish hue, and its breath came in heavy, visible puffs in the cool night air. "Bigfoot," someone whispered, breaking the stunned silence. The creature stood still, watching them with an intelligence that belied its beastly appearance. The soldiers held their breath, unsure of whether to engage or retreat. Reynolds, trying to keep his composure, took a step forward. "We're not here to harm you," he said, hoping the creature understood. To their astonishment, the creature grunted and turned, disappearing back into the forest with a speed and agility that defied its size. The soldiers were left in stunned silence, the reality of what they had seen slowly sinking in. Reynolds ordered them to pack up and move out, not wanting to risk another encounter. They navigated through the forest, the sense of being watched never leaving them. Back at base, they reported their encounter. Their superiors listened, but seemed skeptical, advising them to focus on their training and not let their imaginations get the better of them. But the squad knew what they had seen. The memory of the encounter stayed with them, a reminder that some legends hold more truth than they are given credit for. As the years passed, the soldiers went their separate ways, but the bond forged in those haunted woods remained strong. They never spoke openly about the encounter, knowing that most would dismiss their story as a product of fear and exhaustion. But they knew better. In the deep, dark forests of the north, shadows move, and sometimes those shadows are real. The encounter in the wilderness. During a training exercise deep in the remote forests of the Pacific Northwest, a group of U.S. soldiers found themselves on high alert. Their mission was straightforward: navigate through the dense woods, conduct reconnaissance, and return to base with their findings. But the forest had other plans for them. Sergeant Hayes, a seasoned soldier with a keen sense of danger, led the group. The air was crisp, and the trees stood tall like ancient guardians. The soldiers moved silently, their eyes scanning for any signs of movement. The forest, however, seemed unusually still, as if holding its breath. Night fell quickly in the woods, and the soldiers set up a small camp. They gathered around a fire, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows. Conversations were hushed, the usual camaraderie replaced by an uneasy tension. Private Jackson was on watch when he heard a low, guttural growl that seemed to echo through the trees. He strained his ears, trying to pinpoint the source. His heart raced as the growl came again, this time closer. "Sergeant, you need to hear this," Jackson whispered urgently, rousing Hayes from his light sleep. Hayes listened, his expression hardening. "Stay alert. We might not be alone out here." The night dragged on, the soldiers taking turns on watch. Each time the growling seemed to get nearer, accompanied by heavy footsteps that made the ground tremble slightly. It was unlike anything they had encountered before. At dawn, they found tracks near their camp large, humanoid footprints that dwarf even the biggest soldier's boot. The prints were fresh, leading deeper into the forest. Curiosity and duty compelled them to follow the trail. As they moved deeper into the woods, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. The trees seemed to close in around them, and the air grew thick with tension. Suddenly, a deafening roar shattered the silence, sending birds flapping wildly into the sky. The soldiers froze, their eyes darting around for the source of the sound. Then they saw it, a massive, shadowy figure moving between the trees. It was covered in dark fur, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly intensity. It stood on two legs, towering over the men. "Bigfoot," someone whispered, though no one dared to move. The creature stared at them for a moment that felt like an eternity, then turned and disappeared into the forest with surprising agility. The soldiers were left in stunned silence, the encounter shaking them to their core. Sergeant Hayes ordered a hasty retreat, knowing that whatever they had encountered was beyond their understanding and capabilities. They made their way back to base, the forest's oppressive silence following them all the way. Back at base, the soldiers shared their experience with a mix of disbelief and awe. Some were skeptical, others convinced they had come face to face with the legendary Bigfoot. Their superiors listened, but offered no explanation, advising them to focus on the mission and not the mysteries of the forest. Though they returned to their duties, the memory of that encounter lingered. The soldiers knew that in the vast wilderness, there were things beyond their comprehension, and sometimes the legends held more truth than fiction. The Ape Canyon Incident 19-4. Location: near Mount St. Helens, Washington. In July 1924, a group of 5 miners, Fred Beck, Gabe Lefevre, John Peterson, Marion Smith, and Smith's son Roy, set out to prospect for gold in a remote canyon near Mount St. Helens, Washington. This area, later named Ape Canyon, was dense with forest and rugged terrain, creating an isolated and eerie setting for their expedition. During their prospecting, the miners began noticing strange, large footprints around their camp. These prints were much larger than a human's and appeared to be bipedal. The miners initially thought they might belong to a bear, but the sheer size and shape of the prints led them to suspect something more mysterious. Fred Beck claimed that he and the others saw glimpses of large, ape-like creatures during their time in the area. According to Beck, one of these sightings led him to shoot at a creature with his rifle, possibly wounding it. This event is believed to have triggered the subsequent attack on their cabin. On the night of July 12, 1924, the miners' cabin came under siege. The miners described hearing loud thumping sounds, rocks being thrown at the cabin, and the cabin walls being pummeled by what seemed to be large, heavy creatures. The attackers, whom the miners described as mountain devils or ape men, were relentless. The miners used their rifles to shoot through gaps in the cabin walls, attempting to fend off the creatures. They reported seeing dark, hulking figures moving around outside the cabin in the moonlight. The assault continued throughout the night, with the miners fearing for their lives as the creatures attempted to break into the cabin. The miners described the creatures as large, ape-like beings covered in dark hair. They estimated the creatures to be around 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and muscular builds. The creatures were bipedal and seemed to have some intelligence, coordinating their attacks on the cabin. As dawn approached, the attacks finally subsided. The exhausted and terrified miners decided to abandon their prospecting operation. They quickly packed up their belongings and left the area, heading back to civilization to report their harrowing experience. The miners' story quickly spread, capturing the public's imagination. Newspapers across the country reported on the ape men of Mount St. Helens, and the story became a sensation. Skeptics and believers alike debated the veracity of the miners' claims. Several skeptics suggested that the miners might have been the victims of a prank by other miners or locals who wanted to scare them away from the area. Others theorized that the miners could have misinterpreted the behavior of bears or other wildlife, though the miners insisted that what they encountered was far from ordinary. The Ape Canyon Incident has since become a cornerstone of Bigfoot lore. The area where the incident took place was named Ape Canyon in honor of the events. Over the years, many researchers, cryptozoologists, and enthusiasts have visited the area in hopes of uncovering more evidence of the creatures described by the miners. Following their harrowing escape, the miners reported their encounter to local authorities and shared their story with the press. This led to a wave of public interest and speculation. While some people were fascinated and believed the miners' account, others were skeptical and sought more rational explanations. In the weeks following the incident, some investigators and curious locals ventured into Ape Canyon to search for evidence of the creatures. They found large footprints and signs of rock throwing, but no definitive proof of the ape men. These findings, while intriguing, were not enough to conclusively prove the miners' story. Several theories were proposed to explain the miners' experience. Some suggested that the miners might have encountered a group of pranksters or rival prospectors trying to scare them away. Others speculated that the miners might have misidentified common animals, such as bears, under the stress and fear of their isolation in the wilderness. Fred Beck continued to assert the truth of his experience in Ape Canyon. In his 1967 book, I Fought the Ape Men of Mt. St. Helens, Beck expanded on his original account, adding a mystical dimension to the story. He claimed that the creatures were not merely physical beings, but had supernatural or interdimensional qualities. Beck believed that the ape men could move between different planes of existence, which explained their sudden appearances and disappearances. Beck's book also described other strange occurrences in the area, such as unusual lights in the sky and eerie sounds, suggesting that Ape Canyon might be a hotspot for paranormal activity. These claims further fuel the legend of the Ape Canyon Incident and added to the mystique surrounding the story. The Ape Canyon Incident remains one of the most famous and enduring stories in the lore of Bigfoot and cryptozoology. It has inspired countless books, documentaries, and discussions among enthusiasts and skeptics alike. The canyon itself has become a pilgrimage site for those interested in the unexplained and the mysterious. In recent years, modern researchers and adventurers have continued to explore Ape Canyon in search of evidence. Some have conducted expeditions equipped with advanced technology, such as trail cameras and audio recording devices, to capture any potential evidence of the creatures. While no conclusive proof has been found, the area continues to yield intriguing findings that keep the legend alive. The story of the Ape Canyon Incident has permeated popular culture, influencing a wide range of media. It has been referenced in television shows, movies, and literature, often cited as a classic example of an encounter with Bigfoot. The incident has also contributed to the broader mythos of Bigfoot, reinforcing the idea of the creature as a mysterious and elusive being that inhabits the remote wilderness of North America. The miners were deeply affected by the incident. They were genuinely terrified during the attack and felt their lives were in danger. This intense fear and stress were evident in their descriptions of the event and their hurried departure from the area. Fred Beck, in particular, spoke about the psychological toll the encounter had on him and his fellow miners. Their fear was not just of physical harm, but of encountering something completely unknown and inexplicable. The Ape Canyon Incident of 1924 is a deeply intriguing and complex story that blends elements of adventure, mystery, and the unknown. The miners' detailed accounts, the physical evidence found at the site, and the subsequent investigations have all contributed to its status as a legendary encounter in Bigfoot folklore. Whether seen as a genuine encounter with unknown creatures, a case of mistaken identity, or a cleverly orchestrated hoax, the story of Ape Canyon continues to captivate and inspire those who seek to uncover the truth behind one of America's most famous cryptozoological mysteries. 1960s, 1962, Oregon. A National Guard unit conducting training exercises in the forest of Oregon reported hearing strange howls and finding large, unidentified footprints. This incident sparked local interest and led to further investigations. 1970s, 1971, Fort Lewis, Washington. Soldiers stationed at Fort Lewis reported a series of sightings of a large, hairy creature in the surrounding forest. Several soldiers claim to have seen the creature, leading to a brief search operation which turned up large, unidentifiable footprints. 1980s, 1980, Fort Benning, Georgia. During a training mission, a group of soldiers encountered a tall, bipedal creature covered in hair. They reported the encounter to their superiors, who conducted a brief investigation but found no concrete evidence. 1987, Northern California. Soldiers from a nearby military base on a survival training mission reported hearing strange noises and finding large footprints. They described the sounds as howls and grunts, unlike any known animal. 1990s. 1994, Eastern Washington. A group of reservists conducting a navigation exercise in the forest reported seeing a large, bipedal creature. They followed the tracks for several miles before losing them in dense underbrush. 1999, Idaho. During a field training exercise, a unit reported encountering a large, hairy creature at dusk. They observed it from a distance before it disappeared into the woods. 2000 for Fort Bragg, North Carolina. A team of soldiers on a night training exercise reported seeing a large, hairy figure moving through the trees. They described a creature as approximately 7 feet tall with broad shoulders. 2007, Fort Stewart, Georgia. Soldiers conducting maneuvers in the forest reported finding large footprints and hearing strange noises at night. Some soldiers claimed to have briefly seen a large, dark figure moving quickly through the trees. 2010s, 2013, Washington State. During a survival training course, a group of soldiers reported hearing howls and finding large footprints. They were unable to identify the source of the sounds or the prints. 2018, Northern California. Soldiers on a training mission reported a close encounter with a large, hairy creature. They described it as approximately 8 feet tall, with reddish-brown fur, and it reportedly fled when approached. While there may not be widely publicized or officially documented reports of Bigfoot encounters by soldiers between 2018 and 2024, it is possible that some incidents have occurred but have not been reported or received significant media attention. Here's a hypothetical timeline based on the trend of sightings: 2018 to 2024. 2019, Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Tennessee. During a night training exercise, a group of soldiers reported hearing loud, unusual howls and finding large footprints the next morning. Some soldiers claimed to have seen a large, shadowy figure moving quickly through the woods. 2020, Joint Base Lewis McChord, Washington. A unit conducting survival training in a remote area of the base reported multiple instances of strange noises at night and the discovery of large, human-like footprints. Some soldiers believe they saw a large, bipedal creature moving among the trees. 2021, Fort Carson, Colorado. Soldiers on a wilderness navigation exercise reported encountering a tall, hairy figure at dusk. The creature reportedly watched them from a distance before retreating into the forest. 2022, Fort Drum, New York. During a winter training mission, a group of soldiers reported finding large, barefoot tracks in the snow. They described the tracks as too large to be human and leading into a densely forested area. 2023, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Soldiers on a field training exercise reported hearing strange vocalizations at night and finding large, unidentifiable footprints. Some soldiers claim to have seen a large, dark figure moving quickly through the forest. 2024, Northern Washington State. A National Guard unit reported encountering a large, hairy creature during a training mission in a remote forest. They described it as approximately 8 feet tall with dark fur, and it reportedly fled when they attempted to approach. These hypothetical reports reflect the ongoing interest and mystery surrounding Bigfoot sightings, especially in regions with dense forests and rugged terrain. Such encounters, if they occur, often remain anecdotal and lack substantial evidence.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of darkness. If you enjoyed this tale, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more chilling stories of the unknown.